Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome all my medical and dental students of uh, Faisalabad Medical University to today's lecture regarding the functional types of movements in the gastrointestinal tract. So, what we need to know about the movements of gut is that there is presence of two types of movements in the gastrointestinal tracts. And what are they? The two types, they are the propulsive movements, the mixing movements. Now let's talk about them one by one. First is the propulsive movements. They cause the food to move forward along the tract at an appropriate rate to accommodate digestion and absorption. And number two type is actually the mixing movements. Now these type of the movements, they keep the intestinal contents thoroughly mixed at all times. So we should be knowing that there is presence of two different type of movements. The function of the first propulsive movements is to move the food ahead down the tract, whereas the function of mixing movements is actually to keep the all intestinal juices thoroughly mixed with the food all the time. Now let's talk about them in detail. The propulsive movements, they are actually broadly given the term peristalsis. Now the basic propulsive movement of gastrointestinal tract is the peristalsis. Now what happens is that a contractile ring appears around the gut and then it moves forward. Now any material in front of this contractile ring is automatically moved forward. So this is actually the way by which the propulsive movements or peristalsis takes place. Now peristalsis is an inherent property of many syncytial smooth muscle tubes, which are that if the stimulation takes place at any point in the gut, it can lead to a contractile ring to appear in the circular muscle, and this ring then spreads along the gut tube. Now peristalsis also occurs in bile ducts, glandular ducts, ureters, and many other smooth muscle tubes of the body. So peristalsis is actually the type of contractile movement in which the ring appears and then movement occurs along the tube. So it is there wherever there is presence of smooth muscle tubes in the body. Now the usual stimulus for intestinal peristalsis is distension of the gut. That is, if a large amount of food collects at any point in the gut, the stretching of the gut wall stimulates the enteric nervous system to contract the gut wall 2 to 3 centimeters behind this point, and what happens is that a contractile ring appears which initiates a peristaltic movement. Other stimuli that can initiate peristalsis, they include chemical or physical irritation of the epithelial lining in the gut. Also, strong parasympathetic nervous signals to the gut will elicit strong peristalsis. See how the ring appears in the smooth muscle tube of the gut, and just few centimeters before you can say the appearance of distension, and just in zero time you can see 5 seconds later you can see that this is going to move the things ahead. Now peristalsis occurs only weakly or not at all in any portion of the gut which has congenital absence of the myenteric plexus. Also, it is greatly depressed or completely blocked in the entire gut when a person is treated with atropine to paralyze the cholinergic nerve endings of the myenteric plexus. Therefore, we should be knowing that if we want to have effective peristalsis, it requires an active participation of myenteric plexus. Now let's talk about the directional movement of peristaltic waves towards the anus. Peristalsis can occur in either direction from a stimulated point, but it normally dies out rapidly in the oral direction, while it continues for a considerable distance towards the anus. Now, the exact cause of this directional transmission of peristalsis has never been ascertained, has never been known, although it probably results mainly from the fact that myenteric plexus itself is polarized in the anal direction. So, in order to maintain the homeostasis, in order to maintain the healthy nutritional support of the body, in order to avoid the weakness, in order to provide the proper nutrients to a person, this peristalsis is more, you can say, friendly to move towards anus than towards the mouth. And one of the causes, scientific causes, is this, that the myenteric plexus is polarized in the anal direction. Now let's talk about what is law of the gut. We should be knowing about, because frequently it is being asked that what is the law of the gut. We should be knowing about what is peristalsis, what is law of gut. So let's talk about it. Law of the gut. Now, when a segment of the intestinal tract is excited by distension and thereby there is initiation of peristalsis, the contractile ring causing the peristalsis normally begins on the ovary side of the distended segment and moves towards the distended segment, pushing the intestinal contents in the anal direction for 5 to 10 centimeters before dying out. So this is peristalsis reflex, law of gut. These are very important viva questions. Now, at the same time, the gut sometimes relaxes several centimeters downstream towards the anus, which is called receptive relaxation, thus allowing the food to be propelled more easily toward the anus than towards the mouth. So we should be knowing about it. This complex pattern does not occur in the absence of myenteric plexus. Therefore, the complex is called the myenteric complex, myenteric reflex, or peristaltic reflex. The peristaltic reflex plus the anal direction of the movement of peristalsis is known as the law of gut. Now, mixing movements. The second type of the gut movements, we should be knowing about it. Mixing movements, they differ in different parts of the alimentary tract. In some areas, the peristaltic contractions themselves, they cause most of the mixing. This is especially true when forward progression of the intestinal contents is blocked by a sphincter, so that a peristaltic wave can then only churn can then only mix the intestinal contents rather than propelling them forward. At other times, local intermittent constrictive contractions they occur every few centimeters in the gut wall. These constrictions usually they last only 5 to 30 seconds. Then new constrictions occur at other points in the gut, thus chopping and shearing the contents first here and then there. These peristaltic and constrictive movements are modified in different parts of the gastrointestinal tract for proper propulsion and mixing. Now let's talk about the splanchnic circulation. Now what is this term, splanchnic circulation? See this diagram, you can see the venous supply, the arterial supply, what is this portal circulation, how the liver is helping. Now the blood vessels of the gastrointestinal system, they are part of a more extensive system called splanchnic circulation. It includes the blood flow through the gut itself plus the blood flowing through spleen, pancreas, liver. The design of this system is such that all the blood that courses through the gut, spleen, and pancreas then flows immediately into the liver by way of the portal vein. Now, in the liver, the blood passes through millions of minute liver sinusoids and finally leaves the liver by way of hepatic veins that empty into the vena cava of the general circulation. Now, this flow of blood through the liver before it empties into the vena cava allows the reticuloendothelial cells which line the liver sinusoids to remove bacteria and other particulate matter that might enter the blood from the gastrointestinal tract, thus preventing direct transport of potentially harmful agents into the remainder of the body. So it is very important to know what is the definition of splanchnic circulation. Now, the non-fat water-soluble nutrients absorbed from the gut, like carbohydrates, proteins, they are transported into the portal venous blood to same liver sinusoids. Now here, both the reticuloendothelial cells and the principal parenchymal cells of the liver, the hepatic cells, they absorb and store temporarily from 1/2 to 3/4 of the nutrients. Almost all of the fats absorbed from the intestinal tract are not carried in the portal blood but instead are absorbed into the intestinal lymphatics and then conducted to the systemic circulating blood by way of the thoracic duct bypassing the liver. See how this whole splanchnic circulation taking place. Now, on entering the wall of the gut, the arteries they branch and they send smaller arteries circling in both directions around the gut, with the tips of these arteries meeting on the side of the gut wall opposite to the mesenteric attachment. From the circulating arteries, still much smaller arteries, they penetrate into the intestinal wall and they spread along the muscle bundles into the intestinal villi and into submucosal vessels beneath the epithelium to serve the secretory and absorptive functions of the gut. See, the effect of gut activity and metabolic factors on gastrointestinal blood flow. Under normal conditions, the blood flow in each area of the gastrointestinal tract as well as in each layer of the gut wall is directly related to the level of local activity. Like during active absorption of nutrients, the blood flow in the villi and adjacent regions of the submucosa can increase up to 8 times. Likewise, blood flow in the muscle layers of the gut increases if there is increased motor activity. For example, after a meal, the motor activity, secretory activity, and absorptive activity, they all increase. Likewise, the blood flow increases greatly, but then it decreases back to resting level over another 2 to 4 hours. Now, the possible causes of increased blood flow during gastrointestinal activity. Now, some facts they are very much known, like if there is presence of a vasodilator substance from the mucosa of gut during digestive process, there is increased blood supply. Like most of the peptide hormones like cholecystokinin, VIP, vasoactive intestinal peptide, gastrin, secretin, these are all actually going to lead to increased blood flow. Second, most of the gastrointestinal glands they also release into the gut wall two kinins like caladin, bradykinin at the same time that they secrete other substances into the lumen. The kinins they are powerful vasodilators which are believed to cause much of the increase mucosal dilatation that occurs along with secretion. Third, if there is decrease in the oxygen concentration in the gut wall, it can increase the intestinal blood flow at least 50 to 100%. Therefore, the increased mucosal and gut wall metabolic rate during gut activity probably lowers the oxygen concentration enough to cause much of the vasodilatation. The decrease in oxygen can also lead to as much as a four-fold increase of adenosine, a well-known vasodilator that could be responsible for much of the increased flow. Now, another term which is quite important, and what is that? The countercurrent blood flow in villi. The arterial flow into the villus and venous flow out of the villus are in directions opposite to one another, and the vessels they lie in close approximation to one another. So, because of this vascular arrangement, much of the blood flow, oxygen, it diffuses out of arterioles directly into the adjacent venules without ever being carried in the blood to the tips of the villi. So, as much as 80% of oxygen may take this short circuit route and therefore not be able for local metabolic functions of the villi. See, the blood supply in the villus. Now, under normal conditions, this shunting of oxygen from the arterioles to the venules is not harmful to the villi, but in disease conditions in which blood flow to the gut becomes greatly decreased, like conditions, for example, circulatory shock, what happens is that oxygen deficit in the tips can lead to become so much that it can even lead to ischemic death of the villus and disintegrate. Therefore, for this reason and others, in many gastrointestinal diseases, the villi become seriously blunted, leading to greatly diminished intestinal absorptive capacity. Now, nervous control of gastrointestinal blood flow. Now, stimulation of the parasympathetic nerves, they go into stomach and lower colon, is in the same time that it increases glandular secretion. This increased flow probably results secondarily from the increased glandular activity, not as a direct effect of the nervous stimulation. Sympathetic stimulation, by contrast, has a direct effect on essentially all the gastrointestinal tract to cause intense vasoconstriction of the arterioles with greatly decreased blood flow. After a few minutes of this vasoconstriction, the flow often returns to near normal by means of a mechanism known as autoregulatory escape. So, it is important to know that what is autoregulatory escape. That is, the local metabolic vasodilator mechanisms that are elicited by ischemia override the sympathetic vasoconstriction, returning toward normal the necessary nutrient blood flow to the gastrointestinal glands and muscles. Importance of nervous depression of gastrointestinal blood flow when other parts of the body need extra blood flow. A major value of sympathetic vasoconstriction in the gut is that it allows shut-off of the gastrointestinal and other splanchnic blood flow for short periods during heavy exercise when the skeleton muscle and heart need increased flow. Also in circulatory shock, when all the body's vital tissues are in danger of cellular death for lack of blood flow, especially the brain and the heart, sympathetic stimulation can decrease blood flow to very little for many hours. Sympathetic stimulation also causes strong vasoconstriction of the large volume intestinal and mesenteric veins. This vasoconstriction decreases the volume of these veins, thereby displacing large amounts of blood into the other parts of the circulation. So, in persons experiencing hemorrhagic shock or other states of low blood volume, this mechanism can provide as much as 200 to 400 ml of extra blood to sustain the general circulation. So, this is all about today's lecture regarding the types of movements, the how the blood supply is there, what is the role of portal circulation, I mean splanchnic circulation, what is the importance of nervous depression of the gut blood flow whenever there is extra amount of blood required by the other vital areas in the body during the course of any shock-like condition. So these all terms are quite important, and I hope all of you must be doing great work at home. So stay blessed and Allah Hafiz.